Hello, welcome to another edition of Trial by Magus. First off, I'd like to apologize for the long hiatus from my last new video. I've begun new work in real life and it is mentally very challenging. I've been coming home from work and basically by the time I get home my brain has been rendered into a fine putty. And I haven't been able to do the editing and get the concentration necessary to put these together. So, today I'm going to be kicking back in with a review of this, the Tier 6 German bomber, the Dornier Do.217M. Now this is an interesting bomber. Historically, it basically was an enlarged, improved version of the already proven flying pencil, the Do.17, which appears in World of Warplanes as the Tier 4 German tech tree bomber. Now, the Do.217, due to its improvements, was a much more versatile and powerful aircraft. This was used in horizontal bombing, just as the Dornier 17 was, but the Dornier 217 was also capable of carrying rockets, using torpedoes as an anti-shipping aircraft, and you see this strange-looking extension on the back here. It was capable of performing dive bombing as well, and that's what this system back here is for. It's a clamshell dive brake. Now, the Dornier 217M, as it appears in World of Warplanes, has much stronger self-defense than its predecessors. Let's take a look at what she has here. Alright, the Dornier starts off with a BMW radial engine, but that gets changed into, in its final configuration, this inline V12 from Daimler-Benz. Very powerful engine and allows it to keep its speed up at higher altitudes. It also changes the propeller setup from 3 blades to 4. Self-defense, quite a bit sturdier. On the front of the aircraft here you have a pair of 7.92mm MG81s, and those are tied together. They fire at the same time. It basically does double the damage of the single 7.92, as you might expect. They're also fairly long range for that light of a caliber gun. Its base range is 600 meters, which can be improved, and I highly recommend you do, but I'll get into that later. The rest of its guns are German 50 cals, the 13mm machine gun. You have one on the top here, one to each side of the crew gondola, and then there's another one mounted on the bottom in a tub configuration, not a turret, so its range of fire is not the best. Best range of fire on the plane is provided by the top turret, which can fire almost straight off to the sides, directly to the back and above the aircraft. It cannot fire forward. That's what these guns right here are for. Armament-wise, well, you're not going to shoot down a lot of planes with those guns, although it is possible if you build your crew and your equipment set up for it. Here's where you're going to make the difference, your bombs. These are pretty good, and they compare very differently to the previous loadouts that the other German bombers have had, which were all clusters of bombs. These, the Dornier 217, carries 8 single bombs, and each one of them is a 250 kilogram monster. They do 4,400 damage on blast, and they have a damage radius of 75. And that can be improved with proper skills on your pilot, and we'll get into that. The big takeaway there is that with the clusters of bombs on prior German bombers, you wanted to start dropping your bombs as the ground target came into the reticle, so you would carpet the bombs from one end to the other. With this single drop big bomb, what you want to do is go for accuracy, build your build your bomber and your crew for it, and try to get that bomb dropped dead center in your target so that it does maximum damage with its large damage output and wide blast radius. The reload time on these bombs for the Dornier is also quite high, so you want to make sure that each one of those bombs is dropped to maximum effect on hardened targets and high altitude AA cannons that are going to be doing damage to you flying at altitude. Tactics-wise, with the Dornier, I tend to always fly my German bombers as high-altitude fast bombers. They can be made to perform in the low-altitude raider role, but you have to really build your crew and your equipment set up for it, and their defensive guns really aren't up to the task of competing, especially at this tier, with aircraft like the American 826 Invader. It just can't be done. You don't have the forward firepower to deal with the Invader at low altitudes, and your defensive armament is quite weak compared to the suite of 50 caliber guns that the American has. Plus, if that American gets on your tail, he will shred you with his half dozen 50 calibers before your guns do any appreciable amount of damage in return. He's better armored than you, and just overall performs much better in the low altitude roles. So specialize with what you're good in with these aircraft, and what they excel at is high altitude bomb saturation of ground targets in coordination with other aircraft on the team. Only strike out on your own in these aircraft if it is absolutely necessary to try to clinch a win. And if you have to do that, the game may be over already. Let's take a look at optional equipment to mount on this thing for a high altitude build. Obviously I've gone for Bomb Sight 2 to increase accuracy of my bombs. You get those things dead center and it's going to result in a lot of points for you. Turret stabilization to increase the firing range of my defensive guns by 15%. This combined with applicable gunner crew skills can get those 50 caliber German guns range extended almost out to a full kilometer, which at high altitudes and enemy aircraft stalling out around you is very effective. They won't be able to keep up with you, and if you've got enough points on your gunner to start doing critical damage to their engine and their pilot, they're going to have extreme difficulties keeping up with you unless if they've got a lot of hit points and powerful guns and powerful engines like heavy fighters, which are the counter to bombers anyway, so that's not a surprise. Finally, engine tuning to allow me to crank a little bit more power out of these engines, get up to altitude, and maintain my speed. Let's take a look at crew skills. Alright, on my pilot here, I've taken Demolition Expert, which increases the amount of damage caused by my bombs and their blast radius by 15%. For a single drop bomber like the Dornier 217, this is a huge ability to have, and I consider it even more important than getting its engine performance increased, which I did with my second 2 points on this pilot, Engine Guru 1. The next 3 points that my pilot earns are going to go towards Engine Guru 2. On my gunner, I've wanted to increase the effectiveness of its rear guns by getting those ranges extended out to take advantage of the extended range that German machine guns enjoy. So for my first ability, I took Armor. The second ability, Ballistics Expert, to increase the firing range of my turrets by 15% and the effective turret stabilization by a further 20%. That's a huge ability to get. After this, because of the light amount of damage that these guns are putting out, my choice for the next ability is going to be either Precision Gunner to deal out that critical engine and pilot damage to fighters that I'm firing at, or alternately Defensive Fire to decrease the amount of damage that I take from aircraft that are attacking me that I am actively shooting back at. That about sums it up for the Dornier 217. There is one version of this aircraft that we do not have available in the game yet, and that is the heavy fighter variant of this. They actually had a version of this aircraft, much like the Dornier 17Z Tier 3 Premium Heavy Fighter, where the front of the aircraft was plated over with metal. The extra crew was removed in favor of a huge gun bay on the front that carried a suite of 20mm cannons and a whole bunch of German machine guns, and she was used as a night fighter in an anti-bomber role. We may yet see that in the future, seeing as this airframe is now modeled in the game, so I would keep my eyes out for that as an eventual future high-tier premium German heavy. I have a fight for you now in this thing as a high-altitude bomber during the attrition event. I hope you enjoy it. Good hunting.
You are approaching the area of combat operations. Be ready. Pilots, get ready for action. Let's go.